So I'm at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. I'm just going to ramble about all the planes I see with a short blurb, and I might get some things wrong because I'm using my intuition, so please let me know if I got something wrong. Otherwise, enjoy my rambling. This is the F-82. It's two P-51s stuck together. It's called the F-82 because it has 1.6 times the wingspan of a normal P-51, and 51 times 1.6 is about 82, so it's the F-82. Normally there's a whole bunch of guns in the center, but they have the gun pod and guns removed, so that's a little sad. This is the B-36 Convair. It is the largest conventional bomber ever produced. It's got 3 propeller engines and 2 jet engines at the end. You can kind of see them. You can also see them down there. So 4 engines in total, 4 jet engines and 6 propellers. So we call it 6 turning and 4 burning. The wing was actually so thick that there's a tube that you could crawl down and you could inspect the engines as they're operating. There's also a tube down the center of the fuselage that people could also crawl down. And back there, that is an experimental tire that they were gonna try on the B-36, but it's too big and would actually break the runway as it lands. So the actual landing gear that they use is just 4 normal tires. This is a RF-86. It is a F-86 Sabre, but specifically for reconnaissance. The gun pod holes are actually fake, those are just painted. The actual payload is the camera mounted below the pilot. The bulge is where the film is stored. It looks like it's got some fins down there. Some other stuff for the camera. I've never actually seen this model before. It's got the air brakes out. Pretty neat little dude here. This is a B-50. It's a reconnaissance version of the B-29. One interesting thing here are these little doodads just hammered onto the tip of the propeller. I'm not entirely sure what they are. I'm thinking they're either to protect the leading edge, but I actually think they're prop balancers, you know, to make sure that the weight of each propeller is the same, but to be entirely honest, I have no idea what they are. So this is a stripped out F-86 with the skin removed. You can actually see all the internal components. You can see the 2 20mm, or this version had 4 20mm guns, but it's actually pretty insane how beefy the internals are. Some oxygen tanks for the pilot, and the gun radar up there. It's not to lock on any missiles, but it's to calibrate the gun sight. So it actually have a lead indicator built into the gun sight using the radar system. Actually gives you an idea of all how much electronics there are in airplanes. See, look at all those conduits, and it looks like it also has the slat assembly peeled back, so you can see the slats. I think these are actually spring loaded, so they automatically come out at low speed, or they might be deployed. I am not sure. Another neat thing you can see with the exposed F-86 is this seam running above that flap mark. You can see all the fuselage struts going front to back disconnect there. There's a little seam there, and you can actually basically take off the entire rear tail assembly of the F-86 to actually get access to the engine if you want to do an engine replacement or engine maintenance. This is a B-58 Hustler. It's a supersonic delta wing bomber. If you actually look at the bomb bay area, it doesn't actually have a bomb bay because the fuselage is so small. So this is actually the bomb beneath it. It's double bulbous because the lower portion, the lower portion is actually a fuel tank. And so you would use up all the fuel in the lower fuel tank first, and then you would drop that fuel tank, and then this upper portion is actually the actual bomb. So you would drop the fuel tank first, then you would drop the bomb, and then you'd egress out of the operational zone. The rear of one of the B-58 Hustler's engines, and if you actually look carefully at the actual nozzle, it is diverging. So it's kind of the same way a rocket nozzle diverges. I think the afterburner in there is gonna like cause choke flow, and once you have choke flow, that's how you're gonna start to have a rocket engine instead of like a normal jet engine. So you definitely want a divergent nozzle, and all of these afterburning nozzles, they're like fans, so you can actually adjust your exhaust radius and get the right kind of expansion that you want out of your nozzle. This is a F-102 Delta Dagger. It's got a delta wing, and like one interesting thing about the intake is you actually can see there's a splitter plate that will separate the boundary layer coming off the nose, so that the engine actually has clean air. And then that splitter plate just diverts clean air into the engine, and it takes the boundary layer and just forces it either up or down and just like out of the way. On the wing section of the Delta Dagger, you actually see these plates that you see a lot on like Cold War era fighters. These are just wing fences. There's one further up on the wing too, and these stop span-wise flow. That's flow going from the base of the wing to the wingtip, because span-wise flow is very bad. It's airflow that doesn't actually generate any lift, and it can lead to stalling of the wingtips. One like neat thing is you actually, on the back side of the wingtip, you can actually see like how much curvature there is to get part of the, as part of the leading edge curvature. And you could also see like some of the air brakes out in the back. Oh, it looks like there's like also like a plate up there. I'm not sure. I think that's like a wing fence. Yeah, I've never seen that. It's like a wing fence, but like for the vertical stabilizer. This is a F-106 Delta Dart, an improvement of a Delta Dagger. Going back to the intakes, you see it has the same splitter plate idea to separate the boundary layer, but this one is articulated, so you can actually adjust where the splitter plate is, and you, depending on how big the boundary layer may be or how it's behaving, you can adjust your splitter plate behavior to divert different amounts of boundary layer to get the optimal engine performance. So that's pretty neat. Okay, this is pretty neat. It's like a dog tooth thing, but it's like instead of coming out, it goes in. That's like, I've never seen that before, and I think it's like all these devices, wing fences, dog tooths and stuff, they want to prevent span-wise flow. You can see this one's like dug in. So I think it does the same thing, but there's certain reasons why you might choose one design over the other. And you can, like, just because it's notched in and like not just protruding out, it still has like a dog tooth like behavior on the outside of the wing. On the backside of the F-106, you can definitely see the diverging behavior of the engine nozzle, just like a rocket engine. On the intake of the F-104 Starfighter, you can actually see that the intake geometry is like really cool. It's a combination of like a splitter plate and then also a diamond like point thing. The idea is when the supersonic air, this fighter is supersonic, when the supersonic air hits that cone, it forms a shockwave, and you want that shockwave. Behind that shockwave will be subsonic air, and jet engines can only intake subsonic air. So that little point there actually slows the air down and actually makes the air ingestible for a jet engine. You'll see the same shock cones on a SR-71. F-104 is like just a super interesting aircraft because like the wingspan is much shorter than the actual fuselage length. That causes a lot of interesting aerodynamics when this is flying that I cannot explain too well. You might want to go look at the Wikipedia page. It's actually pretty unstable, and combined with the details, it's mega fiesta. You should definitely read about it on the Wikipedia page. Here's the F4 Phantom. Everyone knows the F4 Phantom. Super fast boy. Again, on the subject of intakes, look at that. So you got adjustable splitter plate with the hinge there, but there's also these holes on the back end of the splitter plate. You actually run a vacuum behind those holes, and it literally sucks off any extra boundary layer caused by the splitter plate in themselves. So you wick away the boundary layer, and again, you get more clean air for your engines. This one specifically is a wild weasel, and what wild weasels would do is you would fly in over your operational zone, and attract the radar of attract enemy SAM units to turn on their radar. And once enemy units turn on the radar, then you can actually lock onto an enemy surface-to-air missile site with your own radar and then shoot anti-radiation missiles at it. So you would bait out the radar and then use their own radar to track them and then launch an air-to-ground missile to kill the enemy SAM site. A quick note about spiky tubes. So these tubes at the front are all pitot tubes. You'll see them at the front of almost every single aircraft. They measure airspeed by comparing the air that's ramming into the front of the pitot tube and air coming in through a side inlet. So let's see if I can find it. It's probably like further back along the pitot tube. But you measure the air coming in through a side inlet, and the difference in pressure between those inlets gives you a pressure reading. Here is the F-117 Nighthawk, first stealth aircraft really. Stealth, I don't know what else to say, it's a stealth aircraft. One neat thing is, along the idea of making sure there's no round surfaces on aircraft, they've got the pitot tubes covered in like the whole pitot tube is like angular too, which is, I thought was like, wow, you know, you're really hammering home on making sure there's no curved surfaces anywhere. You can see some of the inlet holes on the pitot tube. Another thing, you've got grills over the engine. Make sure that any infrared signatures, you can't really see into those very well, and also make sure that the curved blades of the engine are hidden from radar as well. Here is an AC-130 in gunship mode. It's the same AC-130 from Call of Duty. You see you got your, I don't know, there's 30 mils, 40 mils, 45 mils, 50 mils? I don't know, kind of big. Then you see where you would mount the 120 or 105 howitzer. And then you also got, your Gatling guns and then mini guns. It really is the enemy AC-130 above from Call of Duty. Looking at the sign here, looks like those are 40mm cannons. And here's the howitzer cannon, the 105mm that you could actually mount out the side. Pretty big. This is an A-10 Warthog, prime example of a dedicated ground strike aircraft. You got two engines, so if one flames out or if one takes damage, you can still fly. Neat thing about the landing gear, so you got these like pods for the landing gear. When you actually retract the wheels up, they actually don't go all the way back into the pod. They actually stay partially out. That way, if you take damage, you actually can't extend your landing gear. You can still land, you'll still land on the partially retracted landing gear, and you'll have a higher chance of surviving a crash landing. Also, within the aircraft, there are multiple control lines running to it. So I think there's 2 hydraulic systems and 1 fly-by-wire system. So you could lose, you take a hit and it cuts some control cables. Hopefully the other ones are still active and you can still control the aircraft. Same thing for the tails. 2 vertical stabilizers, so if you lose one, you can still fly. Same idea. Another neat fact is the gun, because it's the whole point of the damn plane. Fires depleted uranium rounds so you can penetrate armor. Neat fact is, it's oh yeah, the gun is offset, or the landing gear is offset, so the gun can stay centered. But even when you look at it from afar, you can see the gun itself is still offset, and that's not a mistake. It's so that the actual firing barrel stays in the center line of the aircraft, so the non-firing barrels rotate out, but the barrel that actually fires stays much closer to the center that way, instead of putting the whole gun rotation axis on center. And that's one of the gun units removed. See the massive magazine drum, huge. Here is a MiG-29. Russian jets are always really nice to see because they're always so curvy. You know, they just look smoother and nicer than maybe say their American counterparts. That's an F-15A, F-15 Eagle. Quick note about design history. American fighters of the time were always designed with power in mind. So the F-15 is a lot more powerful, higher top speed, much bigger, more powerful engines, heavier aircraft in general. Whereas Russians, they prioritize smaller and more nimble aircraft. And so, you know, if you're a Russian fighter, you always try to outmaneuver the enemy. Whereas if you're an American fighter, you just try to yeet it and go very fast. Try to outmaneuver your enemy by having an energy advantage. This is the engine intake for the F-15. You can see one way. So you've got the actual kind of a splitter idea of separating the intake away from the fuselage, but you also have the ramp intake here, so the air that's supersonic will come in and hit the tip of the ramp, and a shockwave will form, and behind it you get your subsonic air. Then deep inside you even see the little punctured holes for the vacuum that would suck away your boundary layer. So it's all about that boundary layer when it comes to engine intakes. Try to get rid of it. And once aircraft start to have radar, you put the radar unit inside the nose, and then you put your pitot tubes out of the way, out back. Here's the B-1B Lancer, absolute unit of a bomber. You got pitot tubes up front, you got some canards over there, you got your 4 afterburning engines down there. Very similar to the Concorde now that you think about it. Once again, you can see there's a separation between the engine pods and the actual wing. Gotta remove that boundary layer. There's a F100 for the painted in Thunderbird colors for performance demo team. See the super long pitot tube here, and then behind it is the air-to-air refueling little pipe thing. So you would pilot that into one of the hanging refueling ports from like a C-130 or something, or whatever. It's a KC-130, I don't know. F-100, very fond of it because I fly it in War Thunder. You see the flats that drop super low. Just a very, very nice aircraft, and the little ugly intake up front, you call it the catfish sometimes. It looks like a catfish. Here's an F-16 in Thunderbird colors. You got the separated intake. You also got these little doohickeys, these vertical fins at the bottom of the aircraft. You want those so that when the F-16 pulls high G maneuvers, you have a vertical stable. So if the air is coming in this way, right, from the bottom, meaning that the aircraft's like flying like this, so the airflow, the vertical stabilizer gets cut off from airflow because the fuselage is blocking most of it. So if you have these vertical fins, they provide a vertical stabilizer functionality that is still exposed to the airflow, so you still have vertical stability when you're pulling high angle of attack maneuvers. Kind of a weird timing to show the rear of the SR-71 first, my bad, but you see the, I think, J-71 turbo ramjet engines, the rear end. There's a really good video on YouTube somewhere you should look them up. They're really impressive engines. See the vertical stabilizers, they're actually all moving, so you actually move the entire stabilizer, because when at high speeds, normal like fin deflection, like if you just had a rudder at the end of a stabilizer, that doesn't work. You got to move the whole damn thing in order to have stability. So that's pretty neat. And they're also canted inwards, so like angled like that instead of like normal like vertical or even out. You want that so that if you have an enemy radar signal coming in, it bounces out away and not back to them. Here's a B-2 stealth bomber, B-2 Spirit. If you look at it from this perspective, you can actually see like the front of the aircraft has this little like beak. It's very similar to how like a peregrine falcon looks. If you like Google the comparison between the B-2 and the Falcon, they look like ridiculously similarly funny. So I think they copied a lot of the same, flight dynamics from the actual bird. Pretty cool. Look, there's a plane called the Dinosaur. Welcome to missiles. I don't really know a whole ton about missiles, but like it's the Titan II, one that launches the Gemini. Yeah, and you got, I don't know what engines those are, but the sign says they're hypergolic. You got this little arrangement here. Each one of those cones is actually a nuclear warhead, and they're independently targeted. So the Minuteman, I think this one, could actually launch one of these. It's a multi-something warhead vehicle. I don't really know, but like each one hits the city. So like if you launch one of these against like Russia, one hits Moscow, one hits St. Petersburg, one hits like Beijing if you want. It's like, or if like launching the US, one hits Boston, one hits San Francisco. Really insane how crazy these can get. Yeah, says this engine, I guess it's a Aerojet LR87, AJ5. I think I've heard of that. I think I've heard Scott Manley talk about it. But these are like hypergolic. So you think about it like Mercury is launched in hypergolics. So if the rocket ever blew up, it would immediately have been poisoned by like N2O or some shit. It's insane.